Hello, New Zealand. Welcome to Straight Talk. Believe it or not, this is episode 50, number 50. Started at the beginning of last year, so if you've been here for every episode, congratulations to you as well. Tonight, big night. We discussed the big topic of the weekend. Did the International Olympic Committee allow a genetic male box a woman in the boxing ring? Everybody's got an opinion on it. We also discussed the current level of toxicity in Parliament, which has reached new heights, or should I say new lows maybe. Is Kamala Harris the next Jacinda Ardern? And does the family status of a politician and whether they're a parent matter? So let's have a look at the panel for tonight. And look, I've got to go to Christchurch first because he was on the very first show as well. Bruce Logan down in Christchurch. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, Bob, and I'm still alive.
Okay, you sound a little bit clogged up, but you're sounding well and you had a nice sunny day in Christchurch. In fact, I hear there was a heat wave.
Oh, there was, yes. We're out there in the sun and laying in the long grass.
Okay. Above you is Ala Pomalele. How are you? You getting good sleep with little Samuel?
Evening, everybody. As I've said, I sleep when I can. I'm probably sleeping right now. I've just managed to keep my eyes open.
We'll keep an eye out. Now, to your right and our left is Peter Williams, who I'm pretty sure is in Washington, D.C. He looked exactly like you, Peter. How are you? Was it a good trip?
Very good, Bob. It was great, and I ran into this fella, Bob McCoskrie, there too, and I thought, interesting who you meet in,
I know.
What was it called? The Elephant and Castle on Pennsylvania Avenue, just down from the White House?
Loitering outside the White House. We were making sure that Biden was, active, doing his job.
Awake.
Awake. Speaking of awake, Simon O'Connor, how are you?
Oh, very well. I thought I'd channel a little bit of Frenchness tonight with sort of a black and white stripe. Also confuses your cameras.
Okay, very good. I know, terrible for cameras, but that's okay. It's not too fuzzy. I have an admission, actually. I slept really badly Saturday night and woke up with a real crook in my neck. Really sore. I don't know if you've had a pinched nerve in your neck. And I can turn to the right, but I can't turn to the left very well. So I guess in political terms...
What's the problem with that politically?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. In political terms, it's perfect. Anyway, the image of the day is this guy, Benjamin Doyle on the right there with a green T-shirt. You're probably saying, well, who's Benjamin Doyle and why do we need to know about him? Well, it's because he's the next Green MP on the list. And so if Darlene Tana gets chucked out of Parliament with the waka jumping law or whatever, then he is going to be in. And I thought you'd like to hear about what his MA thesis was on, because it'll explain to you why he's in the Green Party. His thesis was, it seeks to generate understanding about the factors that enable LGBTQI plus Māori youth to embody and enact tino rangatiratanga. Principles of kaupapa Māori theory provide a paradigm through which this research is conducted, with particular attention paid to the Indigenous research agenda. Importantly, this rangaho seeks to offer an alternative to the conventions of hegemonic empirical academia by centering the voices and lived experiences of those who have historically been subjected to the dehumanizing objectification of Western research practices. So you understand why he's going to be the next one off the blocks into the Green Party. It doesn't sound too good. However, going from the left wing of Parliament to the right wing of Parliament, and this was the latest attempt of relating to New Zealanders. It was Christopher Luxon celebrating tax relief. There we go. I don't know who's in charge of their social media, but I think I might send Ken Bewis down there. Actually, I do have to pay tribute to both Ken and Gordy, producer over here, who have laboured through 50 episodes. So well done, team. I took them out for a little special dinner tonight to say thank you. Right, we're going to get straight into it. First topic, and it's about the Olympics. And is men beating up women now a sport? I tell you what, everybody has been talking about it. This is the image that everybody has seen. And the IOC president says we have two boxers who are born as a woman, who have been raised as a woman, who have a passport as a woman, and who have competed for many years as women, and this is the clear definition of a woman. There was never any doubt about them being a woman, end quote. However, the International Boxing Association said last year that both Keilif and Lynn, which is, that's this one on the left, the red, and you'll notice the boxer on the right, where was she from? Not Hungary, she was from...
It was Uzbekistan, I think, Bob. In the first round?
Uzbekistan, yep. She does an X, sort of a suggestion that, she's the woman in the boxing ring. Both Keilif and Lynn were disqualified from a tournament for testing positive for XY chromosomes and have maintained that both fighters have an unfair advantage. So you've got basically one group against another. You've got the International Boxing group against the IOC. Bulgaria, it was apparently, Peter. Svetlana, it was a quarterfinal. Svetlana Staneva. And the picture shows Staneva making the X with her index fingers. So now it appears that the Italian boxer, that we saw crying, not that one, the Hungarian and the Bulgarian boxers are not happy, but they're being sort of guarded in their response. Now, just before I come around the panel, and Peter, I'm really interested to come to you first because you have been the TVNZ correspondent at how many Olympics have you done?
I've been to about half a dozen, or is it 7? I gave up counting after a while. But, I've been there a few times.
Yeah, so the IBA, the International Boxing Association, has done a test, they say. And why doesn't the IBA just release the test and put it beyond doubt? Now, the answer to that is they cannot. It's protected medical information. They would be sued. But the two boxers concerned can agree to have the laboratory release the tests themselves. So the question is, why haven't they? And the second question is, or the second statement that you hear made a lot is, the IOC approved their eligibility for 2024. But the problem is, or the answer to that is, that the IOC stopped sex testing athletes in 1999, and since then they've deferred to individual sporting bodies to ensure athletes were eligible. So, and of course there's been this spat between the two groups. So Peter, throw some light on all of this because everybody's talking about it. Everybody's got an opinion. I think most people feel sorry for the two boxers involved because they seem to be in the centre of this massive furor. So it's not their fault, but it is the fault of the authorities for not making the law clear. What do you think?
Okay, firstly, let's talk about the individuals concerned. They were born this way. They can't help the way they are. Yeah. Apparently, in the world, there are somewhere between 0.5% and 1% of the population born, I think the term is androgynous, intersex, particularly with these athletes. They apparently have undescended testes, they have high levels of testosterone, and they have the XY chromosome. So it is not their fault. There have been athletes like them appearing in other sports before, most prominently in athletics. It goes back to 1932. There was, in the end, an infamous athlete from Poland, a US resident, but representing Poland in the 1932 Olympics. Her name was Stella Walsh, or Stanislava Valeskovic, who won the 100 metres, won the silver medal in the 100 metres at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin 4 years later.
Now, Peter, I've actually got that image. Is that the one on the right?
That's the one. So that's Stella Walsh, right?
Stella the fella, they called it, apparently.
Yeah, the irony is that when she lost her title in 1936 to an American runner by the name of Helen Stevens was the one who was forced to undergo the sex test. It's extraordinary. But what happened to Stella Walsh was that she was killed in a robbery. She was like an innocent victim of a robbery in Cleveland in 1980. At the autopsy, they discovered then that she was also an intersex athlete. Then there was the case of Tamara Press, the Russian shot putter and discus thrower who won gold and silver medals in 1960 and in 1964. She was also accused of being intersex and therefore had a massive advantage over fully female athletes. What happened in 1968 was that the IOC introduced sex testing for female athletes. By sheer coincidence, Tamara Press retired before the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City, even though she was in the prime of her career. Say what you will about that. So we had sex testing at the Olympics for 30 years, 1968 through to 1999. For whatever reason, that was done away with, and it was left to the international federations. The most prominent intersex case in recent times has been that of Caster Semenya, the South African 800-meter runner. She won titles in 2012 and in 2016. In 2019, I think it was, or 2020, the what was formerly known as the IAAF, now World Athletics, under the chairmanship of Lord Sebastian Coe, decided that intersex women would have to take testosterone treatment to bring their levels of testosterone down to that of a normal female. In other words, back to about 5 nanomoles per litre of blood. This is getting a little bit technical, I know, but it essentially, a male has testosterone at levels between 10 and 35 nanomoles per litre of blood. A woman has testosterone at between 0.5 and 2.5. So the difference in testosterone between a male and a female is huge. And it's that increase in, or that difference in testosterone, which allows the male of the species to be physically stronger. Now, in athletics, I thought it was very unfair that they basically stopped Caster Semenya from being an athlete. She could not help the way she was born. These boxers can't help the way that they were born. The big issue I've got with the boxing is that there is physical danger there to the opponents every time they go into the ring. Now, every time Caster Semenya gets on the starting line, there's no physical danger to her opponents. The only danger is the mental danger, I suppose, because she's always going to win. But when it comes to boxing, that is completely different. And this is where the IOC has been completely and utterly irresponsible in not banning these people from these two athletes from the Olympic Games because of the danger they pose to their opposition. And simmering away in the background as well, Bob, is the big scrap between the IOC and the IBA, the International Boxing Association. It's Russian-led. The IOC don't trust the Russians because of all the doping allegations. The IBA, to be fair, has been involved in some incredibly corrupt activities at Olympic Games in the past. So for these games and for Tokyo as well, the IBA had their status as the governing body of world boxing, of Olympic boxing, stripped, and the IOC does it themselves. So I'm sorry if that's a little bit long-winded, but this is a long-standing issue going right back to the 1930s, and it has yet to be satisfactorily resolved. The best time, the safest time for female athletes, frankly, was when they did the sex testing, those 30 years during the last 30 years of the 20th century. But the IOC now, in its very woke and modern thinking, says that's apparently humiliating for women to have them undergo sex testing, so we don't do it anymore, and this is the inevitable outcome.
Just before I move on, what's her name? Caster Semenya? No.
Caster Semenya, yeah.
Yeah. Was she ever tested a chromosome test, mouth swab, anything like that?
No, she was never chromosome tested, but apparently she was testosterone tested, and the level of testosterone was found to be well in excess of what women were allowed. I think at the time it was 10 nanomoles. She was told to bring her testosterone level down to under 10 nanomoles per litre of blood. World Athletics have dropped that even further, subsequently down to 5 nanomoles per litre of blood.
Yeah.
And Caster Semenya quite rightly said, I'm not going to take drugs to change the way I am. So she's effectively retired from athletics. I mean, for a while they said, oh, you can't run the 800 metres. You can only run longer distances, because apparently that wasn't going to give her the same advantage. But either way, to my mind, it was just outright appalling discrimination against her from World Athletics. It's difficult for these people who are born this way. They can't help it. I don't want them taking drugs to change their physical makeup, their testosterone levels. But when it comes to boxing, I'm afraid you've got to draw the line somewhere because of the danger to the opponents. I mean, one might also ask, what the heck is women's boxing doing at the Olympics anyway?
Okay, Allah, speaking of women.
I identify as a man tonight now.
Now, you actually alerted me to that image that you sent through, didn't you? Because you studied a little bit on this.
I did. It was traumatic having to read all the misreporting and misinformation. I mean, Peter said it all. I think I kind of had probably my first thought was when I saw the headlines was, well, the patriarchy wins again. This is what equality looks like. And so this is what feminism has lied to us about all these years. And here we have it. On the other hand, I didn't think she was, Man, I think is her name, was male. I don't know if people watch the WNBA, but there are a lot of female athletes that are masculine looking. You don't immediately assume that they're men. They just have more masculine features, broader shoulders, bigger muscles, still genetically female. So, and I said that to Bob. I said, oh, she looks like a WNBA player, which tells me that people don't want to the WNBA, which kind of advocates that, pay equity is not a thing in sports because some women's sports are boring and they don't bring in money. Boxing, on the other hand, is not boring. And so I love that women's combat sports is a thing. It's more entertaining than other sports like, I don't know, athletics. I don't know. Peter said it all. This whole controversy has been around since the female sports category has been added to the Olympics. Obviously, for a long time, women couldn't be in the Olympics, obviously because of cultural and societal norms over the centuries. I think what's disheartening is that we continue to see the IOC be negligent about what is becoming a dire reality in terms of biological men actually taking over women's sports. It's also putting a bad threat on women's sports. Like when this broke out, I was kind of disappointed because I heard of two other athletes, an Egyptian and I can't remember the other one, who one is 6 months pregnant and one is 7 months pregnant, competing in the Olympics right now. And that was overshadowed by this, obviously, for varying reasons. So when it comes to women's sports, I get really, gutted when news like these female athletes who are carrying life, yet still competing at the highest, of their sports arena aren't celebrated. But this is, it just, kind of puts a shadow on the whole thing for me. I really hope this highlights the corruption that is in the IOC and their blatant refusal to defend biological women and to uphold the rights of female athletes, even till today as well. And so I think also there's been a blatant disregard for female voices in the development of policies to safeguard the female sports category as well. So I think it raises questions around IOC leadership. How are they picking governance and leaders? And also I'm saddened that this is a solution, but I always think maybe it's time that people just stop watching certain women's sports in order to make a point, or I don't know, they create new sporting bodies that will create new competitions away from what's currently in mainstream competitions in order to, make a stand or push back, because that's what it's coming to, is that either the female athletes who've worked their whole lives to be able to accomplish these goals, whether it's medals or winning world championships, they have to withdraw. They have to, put their dreams on hold because this whole gender ideology, blah blah blah, is kind of shadowing their efforts. And so, I will make a disclaimer, and Bob knows I say this all the time, but I personally think women's sports is boring, other than certain sports like gymnastics or some of the more graceful ones, because women are generally weaker. Like they're slower, they're weaker. Don't get me started on women's rugby and sevens and all that stuff. There's a reason why men's sports make tenfold more money, because it's more exciting, and that's just the reality. It is what it is. People pay for what they want to watch, and they want to watch entertaining sports athletes, and men are generally more entertaining than women. That's me done.
Okay, only a woman could say that, except for netball. I think it's always better to watch netball.
Correct.
Simon, just before I come to you, I saw an article by Professor Coleman, who's at Duke, world expert on sexual development in sport disorders. And in her essay, she said, in June, the IOC issued a language guide that disallows the use of sex-based language to describe athletes, and that requires the treatment of gender-diverse XY athletes who identify as women to be unequivocal. They are women. This language guide follows from the positions the IOC took 3 years ago, that gender-diverse XY athletes should not be considered to have male advantage in the arena simply because they're male, and that male testosterone levels shouldn't be disqualifying. So it seems like they've dug their own hole. In fact, just before we came to air, I just saw this clip where just in the last 24 hours, the IOC has been asked, do they sex test? Have a listen to the response.
What is behind you saying that this test does not meet, the criteria?
There's no reason for the test. The test was, as far as we can see, taken arbitrarily. Decision which I've seen reported related also to the competition where one of the boxers beat a Russian boxer. Now, I don't know if there's any truth in I know that the boxer did beat a Russian in that competition. But the very fact that the decision to do the testing was taken on the spot there, under what purpose, under what the test was for, I don't know. As I say, as far we managed to do away with sex testing in the last century, so not quite sure what the foundation for the testing was.
So done away with sex testing, as you said, Peter. So it's a basic admission that they're not testing. It's basically based on the passport and what's on the passport. And as we know in New Zealand, you can manipulate that. Simon, what did you think? Where have you landed on this issue?
I was going to reverse the order, but the piece that you've just played shows actually how, if you will, the trans or gender ideology is at play, because they're actually trying to conflate the wider, I can just be a woman by believing it, with actually the, if you will, the physical biological reality of those who are intersex, or to use the actual clinical term as disordered sex development. They're trying to unite, conflate, confuse the two. Put really, really simply to people, the complex issue that surrounds these two boxes are being misused, misused by trans activists and others to try and say, look, anyone should just be allowed to be there, including a man who identifies as a woman. So I think the Laurel Hubbard from New Zealand scandal, amongst other things. Secondly, we've always had a separation between men's and women's sport, not because of politeness, not because of novelty. We've done it because there are scientific, very clear advantages, particularly in physicality, that men have in general. And a lot of it is down to testosterone, which ultimately enhances performance in a number of ways. So unfortunately for these two boxers, because as others have noted, they're born this way, they can't help it. And in fact, there's no wrong, error or problem with them being who they are. But the nature of their sex characteristic development is that when they went through puberty, they went through it as men, chromosomally men, which meant that they basically have higher bone density, stronger muscle mass, et cetera, which then I think really is echoing a lot of Peter's point. When it comes to the boxing ring, they are at an enormous advantage, but more importantly, it's a safety issue. But unfortunately, it's been all badly handled from day one, but I think it's become highly politicized because particularly, to be honest, both sides of the debate haven't helped themselves at one level. Those who are for there's only two sexes barreled in very strongly at some levels and have in a way mocked these two women. But on the same side, I think the bigger and stronger voices have been the gender ideologues who are more than willing to misuse the understandable confusion in this space. But at the end of the day, unfortunately, I think for those two boxers, it's not right or safe for them to be there. And I worry overall if the Olympics is drinking the Kool-Aid on gender ideology, that basically women's sports becomes a joke, because actually any man can just basically turn up and by and large, generally speaking, they'll win.
Yeah.
They do win.
Bruce?
Yes. Well, everything's been said, I think, except that I can say a couple of things. My first reaction when I saw the fight, I found it very uncomfortable to watch. And my reaction was a bit of a knee-jerk reaction. I suppose I was conditioned by 70 years ago, just let that register before you organise your life that long. 70 years ago, I can remember a teacher telling us a man's fist should never strike a woman's face. Although I suspect, in retrospect, it must have been a boy's fist should never strike a woman's face. And that's always at the back of my mind, I suppose, when I was watching the fight. But then I discovered, of course, as we now know, that they were intersex people. And so the situation is really brought about by the ideology of the IOC muddying the water. Because trying to read their explanation, it's like wading in porridge or even reading a Ministry of Education attempt to write a maths curriculum. It's just, it's impossible to understand. And I think probably at the bottom of it is that every XY included means an XX is pushed out. And exceptional women get beaten by mediocre men, which strikes me as not really a good trick. And the idea that seems to be shaping the IOC ideology is that sexual identity is some kind of a deeply personal thing that I undertake as my mind directs. And when we used to be like that, and we just think we can control our bodies and we get this discrepancy between mind and body and all kinds of strange things happen. Not more than 10 minutes ago, when that happened, we used to call a psychiatrist. Of course, we don't do that anymore.
Okay, just before we leave this topic,
can I just say a couple of things? Firstly, that clip you showed of Mark Adams, who's I think head of communications or certainly the spokesman for the IOC, a little bit about his background. He was one of Keir Starmer's best men when Keir Starmer got married. He used to work for the WEF in Geneva. Now he's shifted across Switzerland to Lausanne to work for the IOC. Do I need to say any more about his particular way of thinking about the world? The other thing is, the IOC, you might have noticed during these games, and I'm pretty sure it's for the first time, they have brought in mixed relays in swimming and in athletics. Now, we've had the mixed team relay in triathlon for, I think, a couple of games before, which is great. But for the first time, we've got mixed athletics relays, a 4x400 the other day, and mixed swimming relays. Now, again, is this the IOC saying, agenda is actually a construct, let's mix all the teams up and we'll have mixed sports as much as possible? Just a random thought, but I think it's very significant that mixed team relays are becoming more common at the games and other sports apart from triathlon.
And I guess if people enter in on that basis, then they know exactly what to expect. Peter, I was just going to ask you, there was actually a Reuters report which I stumbled across from just March, which says a group of 26 academics have challenged the IOC's framework on the inclusion of transgender athletes, saying it does not protect fairness for women nor align with scientific or medical evidence. It was published in the Scandinavian Journal of Medical and Science and Sports. It said decisions on eligibility for female competition must consider male development rather than testosterone levels. We urge the IOC to reevaluate the recommendations of their framework to include a comprehensive understanding of the biological advantages of male development to ensure fairness and safety in female sports. And that was written, there was about 20 people involved, researchers in there from the UK, from the US and Europe. So it was quite a significant paper. So it seems like the IOC has been sort of told they're wading into dangerous ground, and sporting bodies have tried to figure this out irrespective of the IOC. But the IOC took over the boxing thing because they didn't trust the Russians, and now there's problems.
Yeah, I've just had a naughty thought, Bob.
Sorry?
I've just had a naughty thought.
Yeah.
The Olympic Committee seems to want to take us back to some kind of original paganism of the Olympic Games. I thought maybe we could sort of extend that and go back to the original Olympic Games when all the athletes ran naked. that would solve the problem, wouldn't it?
Great. Excellent. Thanks, Bruce. Excellent idea. Right. Let's just quickly have a look at some of the comments because they have been pouring in. Dominic says that they should have their own category. Interestingly, they tried that last year at, I think, athletics. Sorry? No, it didn't work. And nobody entered.
Yeah.
Daryl said, Olympic Committee madness, what it comes down to is they don't know what a woman is, possibly. Craig says the IBA has been discredited on more than one occasion. The question is whether they are male or female. That's a tough question to answer. Should they be banned for something they can't help? No, they shouldn't be banned, but you also have to act in the safety of the other competitors. And I saw an article that was something like, what if these boxers were your daughters? Well, I think we've all understood that sentiment, but also what if your daughter was the Italian boxer who lasted 46 seconds? So it's a fairness thing. Dominic says the Y chromosome makes a huge difference. Kirstine says depends on which sport it is. If it's a physical contact sport, then yes. Shooting, maybe not. And Louise says the deception is always set in confusion. This is how dark forces operate. Most will just accept the weak explanation on the deception. Simon, have you sort of got the impression that the media have been working in step together on this particular issue and trying to poo-hoo anybody who's raising concerns?
Oh, look, 100%. And the main tactic they're using is actually not confronting the particular question. I mean, the BBC jumps to mind. At no point did it actually touch into the genetic elements. It was very much, she's a woman, anyone else is just a sexist, bigoted fool. Now, granted, I've paraphrased that at the end, but the media are assiduous, mainstream media, have been assiduous in actually avoiding the key question, which ultimately comes to genetics and safety. So, sadly so. But look, that's not a surprise. Granted, I'll defer to others, particularly like Peter. As you all know, I'm not the greatest follower of sport, so my reading is limited.
Well, I have to say, Simon, I'm not the greatest follower of news. Since we got back from overseas, a week ago today, at 6 o'clock, our TV's been on one or other of the Olympic channels, so I actually haven't watched either One News or 3 News since we've been back. I don't know whether or not the story has been covered in their news bulletins. I've looked on their websites. There's no mention of it there, suggesting it hasn't been in the bulletins. There's been virtually no coverage of it on either the Herald website or on the Stuff website. Nothing about it in my Otago Daily Times. So I think the New Zealand media, those who are there, are just saying, put fingers in your thumbs in your ears and go la la la, and just not bothering. The issue is just too hard to cover.
Yeah, I've been monitoring both One News and the Stuff News on TV3, and while they cover it, it's always come, as Simon said, from the angle that, look, these are women. The IOC has said they are women, end of story, and don't be so mean. And they haven't gone into the deeper issue of is the IOC testing? How are they testing? And look, the thing that amazes me is that with the two boxers, they could actually solve this problem by simply releasing the testing that was done by the International Boxing Association.
Yeah, the IBA.
Why
I
haven't
understand they're holding a press conference overnight tonight, Bob. So
okay,
tomorrow,
that'll be interesting.
Tomorrow you won't get anything on the New Zealand media, I don't think, but apparently the IBA, even though they're persona non grata with the IOC, are going to, they're in Paris and they're going to talk to the world's media, probably minus the New Zealand media, overnight. So we may hear something tomorrow if you read the Telegraph or look on X.
That'll be a big crowd. Is it true, Ala, because you're the medical doctor in this group, having gone to Otago University, is it true that you can just take a swab test, take a test inside your cheek and find out whether you're XX or XY? Is that correct?
It's not as linear as you're making it out. Yes, there is the Barb body test that they do. Lots of, I guess, different organisations recommend. But there are other factors to consider, and I won't go into the biology of it or genetics because it's going to bore the audience. But it is. It's one of the more prominent tests that you could use. There are other factors that contribute to the presence of an XY. So there's other genetic prerequisites that could be in place that might muddle the test. So that's why you've got to take some of these sort of genetic tests with caution and also, just with a grain of salt. So that's probably one of the more popular ones, the bar body. I believe IOC used it up until maybe 2003. So with technology having developed at its pace, surely they could bring that back. And I think there's different sporting groups that are calling for the reintroduction of the bar body test as well. So it does sound simple, but there are other factors, genetic factors to consider. So it's not a linear test. It's a test with certain conditions as well that you've got to read the results against. So I don't want to confuse the audience. So it's one of the more popular tests, but there are things to consider that could be confounding.
Okay. And Peter, you're saying that the two boxes and the two boxes are fronting up to the media. Is that what you said, Peter?
Not the boxers, though. The International Boxing Association, the officials who did the test at the Women's World Championships in New Delhi last year. So, no, the two boxers themselves are taking part in semi-finals, I think sometime in the next 24 or 48 hours.
Right. Oh, well.
I think, they've both been guaranteed at least a bronze medal. I suspect both of them are going to win gold medals in their respective divisions.
Okay. I mean, if someone was questioning my manhood, I would just simply front up and prove them right or wrong. But anyway, don't think about it. Right, let's move on.
I got rid of that in the 60s, Bob.
No comment. Right, Green MP Chhour, there's been a whole lot of bad behaviour in Parliament. Let's move back into New Zealand to Wellington, because that's where all the bad behaviour is, apparently. Green MP Julianne Genter was found in contempt of the House because she stood over this national MP and had a rant.
Ms. Genter, please resume your seat. Please resume your seat.
Okay, that's one thing you don't do, wander across Parliament and start yelling at one of the national MPs. Have you ever had that happen to you, Simon? You ever had anybody stand over you and give you an earful? Apart from your wife, that is. No.
Oh, okay. Big call. No, I've certainly had an MP lose their rag in select committee, but not in a threatening way. They lost emotional control, but not specifically at me.
Okay, well, Labour MP Ingrid... Yeah.
No comment.
Labour MP Ingrid Leary apologised to New Zealand First MP Tanya Unkovic because she said during a meeting of the Health Committee while Unkovic wasn't there that Unkovic was a known anti-trans activist. That's simply because Tanya Unkovic has a bill that says that dudes should go in the boys' toilet and girls should go in the girls' toilet. So anyway, Trade Minister Todd McClay from National had to apologise to Green MP Ricardo Menendez March because he made these terrible comments.
Just wanted to raise a matter of that I take personal offence to. Just as I finished, a matter that I took personal offence to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so after the point of order that I did in relationship to Tamitha Paul's question, Todd McClay, the Minister of Trade, threw a bar back saying, quote, as best as I can understand, you're not in Mexico now, we don't do things like that here. And I've just consulted with Debbie Nutter.
Oh, shocking. You're not in Mexico now. I mean, that just cuts deep. Interestingly enough, this March guy, Green MP, he puts out these tweets. So he's happy to say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, despite the offensiveness of that. But he doesn't like someone saying, well, you're not in Mexico now, which is, I mean, factually it's true, isn't it? But this really broke open because ACT MP Karen Chhour, she was on TV and basically, she's been treated atrociously in Parliament, I would say. It started with Kelvin Davis from Labour saying this to her.
This is the ACT Party's Karen Chhour. She was raised in state care and today was taking on the Minister for Oranga Tamariki when this happened.
What the member needs to do is cross the bridge that is Te Tiriti o Waitangi from her Pākehā world into the Māori world and understand exactly how the Māori world operates.
Okay, and Karen Chhour is Māori, and Willie Jackson urged her to cross the bridge to come over from the Pākehā to the Māori. Labour MP Willow Jean Prime called her a sellout during the first reading of the Oranga Tamariki Amendment Bill, And then a Te Pāti Māori MP said Chhour had been made a puppet by her party, which Chhour never got an apology for. And then Karen Chhour ended up on TV really just sharing her heart. It was pretty tough to watch.
I can't control what the public is saying about my personal traits around being Māori enough or not being the right kind of traumatised person. Hearing it from other MPs, that shouldn't be allowed. I'm still a person. And I feel like I'm getting that stripped away from me day by day in this place. I've had enough. I asked for an apology. That's all I wanted, and I didn't get one. And that is so disrespectful.
Yeah, pretty heart-rendering there. I mean, imagine if that was Jacinda Ardern, we would have had a national day of mourning, I think. But this was the response of Te Pāti Māori. She does this TikTok with these facials. The fragility is real, she says about Karen Chhour. Yeah, pretty shocking. And look, just one other thing before I get your thoughts on this, Simon. I'm going to come to you first because you have been in the hot seat. This was the article that was in the Sunday Star Times. Andrea Vance doesn't get on side and say we shouldn't have bullying and Karen Chhour should be treated with respect. No, she said, act the party of crybabies. Once again, if this had been a Green MP or a Labour MP or Jacinda Ardern, would the media be saying crybaby? So, Simon, what are we dealing with here? I mean, has it just got that toxic, or is this just coming from one side of the House who demand tolerance but show the least amount of tolerance?
It's a huge mix and mess. So in some ways, you're going to portion blame across the House. No particular party is exempt. So look, Te Pāti Māori are just a bunch of thugs. But, you know, the ACT Party, to be fair, doesn't always speak very tolerantly. They stir things up. But really importantly, there are certain parties, the likes of Te Pāti Māori or the Greens, who are very good at effectively hypocritical beliefs. So they'll talk about kindness and tolerance and diversity and anti-bullying and anti-racism. And, you know, taking that example of that god-awful TikTok by whatever that woman's name is, insulting, sorry, that's not meant to be rude, I just can't think of her name, even though I was in Parliament with her, that's how relevant she is. But, you know, abusive behaviour towards another Māori woman while talking systemic racism. But fundamentally in behind this is the fruit of identity politics, which is all about division and all about making sure that others are exempted from your worldview. And so long and short, it's going to end like this. It's just going to get worse and worse. It's exacerbated by social media. It's exacerbated by well, actually, let's not call her a journalist, Andrea Vance. We could have a long discussion on here about certain things that she's done over the last few years and her behaviours as well. I'm sure she'd love those back in the newspaper. I mean, an absolute despicable piece of writing. But I suppose, actually, you know what, to be fair to your listeners, I'm beginning to play into a bit of this, aren't I? We get very fired up and a bit personal, and that's just unfortunate. But there is one last very quick point, because obviously the others need to speak, is you've always got these games to a degree that are being played in the House. So the silly comments from someone like Todd McClay, that's often happening, not just by him, I mean, but it's banter from MPs. Other MPs take offence because it helps break the flow of the House. It stops other people's speeches. It's a heated environment. But I think when you've added in the toxicity, which is identity politics based on division, you're going to get more and more of this.
And when you say identity politics, it sounds like it's everybody wants to be offended, are looking to be offended, and will... I mean, I think for most of us, it would sort of roll off our back, and because a lot of people have said You're Not in Mexico Now is actually a reference to everyone who watches Shortland Street, the famous line, was it Temuera Morrison, was it, who says, You're not in Guatemala now, Dr. Ropata. You're too young
this
for
is
that.
The cheap. These are the cheap games. No. So at one level, we don't want to overanalyze it. It's the cheap games that as soon as someone feels there's an advantage to obviously break the flow of the House, to disrupt someone's speech, and just to get a headline, as has happened. It's played by all sides. It's played by all sides.
Okay. Gosh, the texts are pouring in, so excuse my distraction here. Let's keep going. Bruce, is this... it sort of seems like since the new Te Pāti Māori, as opposed to the old one with Tariana Turia and... Who's the guy that
Peter
was
Sharples.
the leader? Peter Sharples. Since the new Te Pāti Māori, the behaviour has just gone through the floor. Is that a fair observation, Bruce?
Well, it's certainly moving in that direction. But my first reaction to this, though, was when Simon said Parliament's a heated place. Well, it's the kitchen of the hotel, isn't it? And so my first thought was, if you can't bear the heat, get out of the kitchen. But however, and I have to read this because I'm not sure of the name, Maria Mino Kapakingi of Te Pāti Māori, in Maori no less, made comments about Karen Chhour that were outrageous, I thought, even malicious. And even worse than that, they were perversely self-righteous. Now, that self-righteousness seems to be a part of the identity. The identity politics is imbued with self-righteousness. It's what fires it up. And Kapakingi and a Green MP, Kaharangi Carter, claimed that the body's chief executive, in considering Auranga Tamariki's obligation to the Treaty of Waitangi, should go to a Maori or Pacific MP because most of the submitters would be Maori. Now, that strikes me, putting the best possible spin on it, as a racist thing to say. And I don't try not to use the word racist because it's such a meaningless, vacuous term. But they are certainly guilty of it in the sense that they have been accusing others of it so vociferously, and they are actually doing it themselves. Perhaps they don't understand what they're asking. But they are saying that race is more important than merit, which seems to be not a good thing to say.
Okay, Ali, you'd expect better behaviour from little Samuel, wouldn't you?
Oh, no, he's a child. He doesn't even know how to regulate his emotions, let alone his diapers. So I think it's sad. I've always thought of Parliament as like a playground for adults who can't regulate their emotions, and they find all these big words to plaster against their unregulated emotions. What's sad for me is I guess I've always thought that this generation of politicians is probably like the generation I would like to skip over. I feel like there is a lack of thinkers, there is a lack of depth and character and intellect that we can't even debate ideas anymore in Parliament. Well, we don't see it. They're slagging each other personally. I think when you kind of step to that level of debate in any institution that's been around for decades, we've lost our grasp on inspirational leaders or aspirational. None of them are inspirational, let alone aspirational. I would just like to, how do we just skip? But God is still sovereign and faithful over our Parliament and our current leaders, and this is what he's given us. And maybe this is the generation of leaders New Zealand deserves. Yeah. So it's kind of disheartening to see that this is the example our supposed, quote marks, leaders are setting for generations, younger generations, and for our children, that it's okay to bully in one of the most public institutions in our country and to get away with it. What are we teaching our young people? What are we teaching girls and boys in classrooms? Because it begins from the top, I believe. Yeah. And this is the type of role models that we see. I should take a leaf out of Peter's book and just not watch TV until Jesus returns. So that's me.
Yeah, I just find it amazing that if it was, like I said, if it was a Green Party, I'm pretty sure if it was a Labour MP, the media would be all over it saying how terrible that she's being bullied. She is the victim. And yet you have a Sunday Star Times, major newspaper on a Sunday, I'm not sure if it's still read, but saying, oh, they're just a party of crybabies. I just find that stunning. Peter, you've been around the newsroom for a long time. Have you seen sort of this behaviour this bad? I mean, you've been out of the loop in the last couple of weeks, lucky you. But have you seen it this bad?
No, what bothers me the most about not just Karen Chhour's breakdown in front of the cameras, but also the performance of Ms. Kapakingi regarding that select committee and Laura Trask, who was the chairperson of it, not being deemed fit to be the chair of that select committee because she's a Pākehā. What bothers me the most is that Jerry Brownlee, as the Speaker of the House, is not doing anything about it. Now, I know as the Speaker, you have to be impartial. You are the Chair of Parliament. But you've also got responsibility to maintain decorum in the place. And frankly, letting Te Pāti Māori, letting people get away with the comments, the overt racist comments that they are making day after day, to me is not leadership on the part of Jerry Brownlee. And I'm really quite disappointed in his performance as the chair of the House. He must have had brought to his attention those comments in Te Reo by Ms. Carter, the other Te Pāti Māori MP, about what she said regarding Karen Chhour. I just think that Brownlee should have been much stronger. And I was very pleased to hear Lockwood Smith, who I think everybody recognises as one of the outstanding speakers in our House of Representatives in my lifetime. He was in a way that, you know, National Party grandees do. He was quite critical of Jerry Brownlee too for not stepping in and just putting a stamp on things, because I think Brownlee was actually found to be missing. I mean, I've met Jerry Brownlee a few times. He seems to be a very affable kind of guy who gets on well with everybody, and Simon will probably back that up. And that's, I guess, one of the main reasons he's got the job as the Speaker. But it's all very well being everybody's mate. Every now and then, you've got to put your foot down and say, no, that is unacceptable behaviour. And I think he's failed to do that on this occasion.
And I actually heard an interview with Sir Lockwood Smith about this whole issue. And he actually said, interestingly enough, he said he went to the opening of Parliament at the beginning of the year, and just the dress standard, the general demeanour, he was surprised at how far it had dropped. Really, really quite amazing.
Well, we saw that clip there of Menendez March, didn't we? Open neck shirt, sort of a casual blazer. I mean, what's so wrong with having decorum? You're not allowed to appear, for instance, in front of the Court of Appeal or the Supreme Court as a solicitor or a lawyer dressed like that. You're expected to wear a suit and a tie, put your gown on. I don't think you wear the wigs anymore, but there are certain places in New Zealand where there are dress codes. And Linking Rawiri Waititi has been the leader of the pack in doing away with the ties and allowing silly cowboy hats and God knows what. But, you know, there's got to be a sense of decorum in Parliament if it's going to retain any or regain any credibility in the eyes of the public. Let's at least have the people who participate in parliamentary debate looking the part, if nothing else. They might not actually be performing and making great policy, but, you know, appearances are everything.
Okay, and I mean, it could go really pear-shaped and you end up wearing hoop T-shirts on a live social media show like this guy down the bottom of your screen. Simon, when did they actually... Simon, when did they actually get rid of the ties? You were wearing ties right up until your last day in Parliament, weren't you?
Yes, it was Trevor Mallard who made the changes. He believed it would make things. He was also the one who wanted to be more family friendly, so we had babies and the like in the chamber, which I thought was just to use the left's term was an incredible case of privilege, because, you know, the women on the checkout counters, for example, or the men driving taxis aren't allowed to carry the children with them, but in Parliament you were. So he was responsible. National, by and large, at the time said that it would keep to its standards. So it was you can hear my hesitation because a number of my colleagues began to drop it as well. But Peter's right. Basically, the symbolic decorum of what you're wearing, I think, actually does flow into how the place operates. And I've been disappointed that the Speaker hasn't stepped in and cauterize this earlier. Until he does, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah. Okay, let's just check just a couple of the comments, because I did see a very funny one come through. Cherie says, are there any parliamentary rules regarding this sort of abuse from fellow MPs in the House? Yes, there are.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. Ricky, that interview with Tova... Yeah, parliamentary rulebook. Ricky, that interview with Tova made me see red for hours. I think that's the one Tova did with Karen Chhour, where she kept on firing questions at her about how the kids were going to be disciplined on the boot camps. Jackie says, did someone call Chloe Schwarbrick a crybaby? Yes, that was Elizabeth Kirikiri, who's no longer in the House, thankfully. Daryl says, where's the Speaker of the House? Absolutely unbelievable. Bullies should be sin-binned and removed from Parliament. Susan likes you, Simon. Don't hold back, Simon. Dominic says, don't people get fired for workplace bullying? Stacey says, doesn't surprise me at all. New Zealand is notorious for bullying and violence. Why would the government be separate from what is now in our culture? Sue said, my father used to say, fight the issue, not the person. Bruce says, bring back prayer into Parliament, problem solved. Well, there is prayer that kicks off the game, but they seem to forget halfway through. Kevin likes you, Allah. Well said, Allah. And Peter, you've got a fan. My father's daughter says, yes, you are correct. Peter, I agree. Cherie says, what alarms me is that Te Pāti Māori says Karen Chhour isn't Māori enough, or words to that effect. That sounds like German ideas of racial purity of the 30s and 40s. Katrina says the people who play the part need to remember it's the people of New Zealand that pay their outlandish paychecks, Simon. And finally, I just have to play this one. Ronnie says, Simon the Russian sailor. Oh, that's brilliant. Right. Look, we're just about out of time, and I do want to do this one. Peter, when you were travelling around the world and watching tennis at Wimbledon and coming back through the States, were you monitoring all the presidential shenanigans and going-ons and Kamala and Biden and all that?
Yeah, I watched the news of Donald Trump's attempted assassination and his encounter with a bullet in an Airbnb late on a Saturday night in Aberdeen. Yes, it's a horrible place, by the way. And I'm sorry to anybody from Aberdeen, but yeah, it's not a beach resort. Okay. You should not put up a sign on your beach saying that this is the Aberdeen Beach Resort. It ain't. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah, well, the question was just our final question, and we've only got about a minute each to answer this, and that is Kamala Harris the new Jacinda Ardern in the way she's been treated by the media? Because it seems like kid gloves compared to Trump, and she is yet to do an actual interview with the media and actually asked questions. So, Peter, and she is, as somebody put it on American television when I was watching it in New York just over a week or so ago, she has been selected, not elected, as the Democratic candidate. So she is the person, remember, who in the 2020 primaries didn't even make it to first base, the Iowa caucuses, because she was deemed so unpopular in a race with the likes of Biden and Pete Buttigieg. So she was so off the pace back in 2020. I just cannot believe that somehow in 2024 she is the chosen one. She's got some horrible policies, and I hope she fails miserably. So do you see similarities between the way the media is treating Kamala and the way they treated absolutely, particularly the CNNs and NBCs and ABCs and CBSs of this world. Fox are a bit more strident, but they're still not as hard as they should be. Yeah, no, it's incredible. Ala, is Kamala the new Jacinda?
I don't follow much of Kamala's news, much to your surprise. I mean, the snippets I've seen of reporting about her by the left-leaning US media definitely are reporting about nothing. I'm still trying to figure out if she's African-American. Technically, she isn't. And so she's obviously been playing to a lot of the identity politics throughout her career, especially her legal career. I saw someone call her Camilla. What's her surname? I don't even know her surname. Harris. So... yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of women in leadership. Oh my gosh, you're the only one who can say this stuff. Shouldn't be in sport. Shouldn't be in leadership. Women are leaders in different spheres of the home and in the public sphere. But for a president, I'm looking back at history and it ain't good. So I don't. She's definitely riding the race card. And, I mean, I saw a recent video where she changed up her accent because she was at a rally which was predominantly African Americans. That was so bizarre. I thought it was an AI video, but it was actually a real thing. So that speaks to a lot of, I guess, her lack of policy. And as Peter said, she doesn't have good policies. She was just a placeholder because they don't have any other popular. But they're definitely, the media favouring her, including Fox. They're not coming down as hard on her. So I hope she loses.
Okay. Bruce, have you become a white guy for Kamala?
Look,
hashtag.
The parallels between Jacinda and Kamala are absolutely frightening. I mean, both are women with a lot of people will say an engaging smile, which goes a very long way. They're both replacements for a weak candidate leader.
Yep.
Superficial political achievement. They're both intellectual lightweights, political lightweights. They've got limited language skills, and they tend to talk in cliches. If you listen to either of them, if you can get through listening to that is. And they're deeply embedded in the political far left. And if I'm to believe a learned friend of mine who writes in the US, both have long-term communist connections. In fact, he's written a book on Kamala's communist connections, which is coming out in a month or two. And both Jacinda and Kamala dose themselves up on the diversity cult, believing that they can prescribe it for the rest of us. And in the background, she could well be successful, which is something I don't bear thinking about. But she closed the gap now in the polls, and in some polls she's ahead. How that spins out in the marginal seats, I'm not entirely sure. But Donald Trump frightens a lot of people, especially women, and she's going to pick up a lot of female votes. So,
I hope not.
Which I suspect Jacinda did as well.
Okay. Simon, you've been sucked in as well?
No, not at all. Though I'm pondering Ala's thing. I'm thinking Elizabeth I, Catherine the Great, Margaret Thatcher. We're going to have to talk offline.
There are a few. They're the exception, not the rule.
Look, yes is the short answer to your question. I mean, the media are very much part of the anyone but Trump camp. And so now that there is someone they can get behind, who's not Biden in this case, they are going to double and triple down. So, yes, you're going to get more and more puff pieces on her fundraising, the polling, how big her events are. It's going to play out very similar to the way that, Jacinda was lauded here. Where it goes, who knows? I think as time goes on, actually, a number of these questions will be raised with her. And that might begin to take some of the shine off. But I would echo a lot of what Bruce said. I mean, the word in my mind is she's just an utter lightweight. Just getting her to explain anything such as, I don't know, inflation or the cloud or the internet, she just is completely it's quite scary. But look, that's politics a lot of the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unburdened. That's it. She's unburdened by a brain cell. I don't know.
Unburdened by what has been. Yeah. And look, apparently there is going to be a debate. Apparently, Fox News is hosting a debate on the 5th of September, I think it is, so a month from now. I mean, I think when she comes up against Trump, that's going to be really, really interesting because she's going to have to string some sentences of knowledge and that make sense. Bruce, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, didn't I hear her say that she had never been to Europe?
No, because they were saying, why haven't you been to the border? And she says, well, I haven't been to the border, but I haven't been to Europe yet. What that had to do, I mean, there's a very good McBlog that just came out today, which has all those clips. Anyway, I'm going to send it to Ala so that she can do some research. Anyway, we are out of time, and you have done a fantastic job on our 50th episode. Welcome back to the country, Peter. Good to have you back on Straight Talk. Ala and Simon, we'll see you at staff meeting tomorrow. There's food. And Bruce, thank you very much, as our founding member who has lasted the whole way. Well done, top of the class. That is us for this week. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next week at 8 o'clock. Oh, Simon, tomorrow morning we've got Solid Ground, 8 a.m. What are you talking about?
We'll talk everything from obviously this new math curriculum through to the shenanigans into the House, and also letting people know about the renew on euthanasia, which the government seems to want to keep quiet.
Okay, and Thursday night is our new program, 5 p.m, which is Political Playback. Simon and I will be discussing the week in politics. We'll be seeing if anybody's actually behaved this week, so we'll have a scorecard for that. Anyway, we're out of time. Thanks for watching. See you next week, Monday night at 8 o'clock. Have a great week.